Think of when you hear the words classical Rome or imperial Rome? Maybe you think of white marble buildings lined with columns, senators in bright white togas with thin purple stripes, centurions in armor with red capes. You probably picture the Rome of Julius Caesar, or maybe the Rome of Nero. But Rome of the Dark Ages was a very different place culturally. The Western Roman Empire declined in importance and eventually collapsed. Although paganism didn't disappear overnight, Christians, and in particular their leader, the Bishop of Rome, were gaining great political power. After the time of Constantine, who converted to Christianity and then decriminalized the religion, the relationship of the Bishop of Rome and the imperial court had been getting closer and closer. In time, the office of the Bishop of Rome would come to be known as the papacy. Modeled after the dynasties of the Roman emperors, the offices remain intact to this very day. As the vacuum of power became wider and wider in Western Europe, the Church fought tooth and nail to fill the void with its own officials and policies. As the culture of the Romans became monotheistic and Christian, many strange stories began to float about, which sought to legitimize Christian beliefs and mythology. The Aeneid, the classical Roman propaganda tool, i.e., epic poem, commissioned by Augustus to legitimize his family's claim to imperial power, along with the tales of Romulus and Remus, defined what it was to be a Roman. For centuries, all Romans could be proud of their past. This is what it meant to be a Roman. But now, the Bible was on equal footing with the Aeneid in defining the Roman character. Such traditions bore forth so many wild contradictions that the early Christians invented stories to make them seem to coexist naturally. A book dated to the 1100s called Graphia Aureae Urbis Romae, Descriptions of the Golden City of Rome, actually state that after the biblical flood, men again became impious and arrogant towards the one true God, and had their language confounded in Babel. At that time, Noah and 3 of his sons packed up their things and moved to the 7 hills of Rome, of all places. They built a city on the Capitoline Hill. Then Italus, a mythological Greek king, and Aeneas, the hero of the Aeneid, moved to the area and founded a city next to Noah and his kids' city. Then Romulus showed up 433 years later to build defensive walls around all of the cities and called them Rome. Now that Rome was Christian, they even had a sort of prophetic founding story that linked them to the Jewish myths of the desert. That folktales would be circulating is not that bad, but the early Christians had much more devious schemes up their sleeves. In the 300s, the Emperor Constantine moved the capital of the Roman Empire to the city of Byzantium and renamed the city Constantinople. When he left the city, he also left a power vacuum, which the Bishop of Rome and his officials were all eager to fill. In the centuries that followed, the bishop was a member of the imperial court who stayed at Rome to oversee the spiritual guidance of the Romans. He acted in the name of the emperor, and after the fall of the Western Empire, in the name of the Eastern Roman Emperor. So the papacy had good connections, very good connections. In the chaos that followed the collapse of the Roman Empire and its infrastructure, the Bishop of Rome was the one constant thing that could be relied on. He also became not just a symbol of power, but power itself, due to the close ties to the imperial house. Sometime in the mid-700s, under the papacy of Stephen II, a document called Donatio Constantini, the donation of Constantine, appeared. The story goes that one day Constantine was busy running around persecuting Christians when he came down with a bad case of leprosy. All of the emperor's horses and all of the emperor's men couldn't put Constantine back together again. Then the pagan emperor had a vision of Saint Peter and Saint Paul, who told him to go see the Bishop of Rome, who apparently was in the business of faith healing. The Pope was brought at once to the Lateran Palace and told the ailing emperor, "Only baptism will cure your leprosy." So, Constantine agreed to be baptized, and magically, his leprosy was healed. he immediately issued a proclamation declaring that Christianity should be practiced throughout the empire, and everyone should give 1/10 of their money to build new churches, because this was indeed the one true God. He donated the Lateran Palace to the Bishop of Rome for all posterity. Then he ran outside with a shovel and dug up 12 bucketfuls of dirt, one for each of the apostles, of course, and thus commenced the building of the original St. Peter's Basilica on Vatican Hill. Constantine then goes on to grant vast powers to the papacy. All judges and bishops are subject to the Bishop of Rome, thus the Catholic hierarchy was created. He grants the Pope and his successors the imperial crown, the purple mantle and the red tunic of the emperors, the scepter, the standards and the banners, and all the imperial paraphernalia. All clergy were granted senatorial status and were granted the right to, quote, ride on white horses adorned with saddlecloth of purest white, wearing white shoes like senators. Then the emperor gave the Pope and his successors control over Judea, Greece, Asia, Thrace, Africa, as well as the city of Rome with Italy and the entire Western Empire. He even offered him the title Western Roman Emperor, but the bishop refused the crown in humility and promised just to wear his humble Phrygian cap, the precursor of the big pointy cap worn by popes today. And since it's not fitting for the emperor to rule in the same city where St. Peter's successors ruled, Constantine decided to found Constantinople in the east and move his court there, away from the Pope. It's a nice story, but it simply is not true. Never happened. The document was a forgery. Constantine is made to refer to his victory over the Huns 50 years before they even appeared in Europe. He uses the word Pope, which wasn't in use for another 200 years. Terms reflecting feudal society, like fief, which didn't even exist in the economic system of imperial Rome, were used. In truth, the emperor probably did give the Lateran Palace to the Bishop of Rome sometime around 310. This would have no negative, far-lasting consequences. But the flat-out lies in the forgery called the Donation of Constantine caused much mayhem and political wrangling, as well as all-out war in the centuries to come. It even caused a rift in the Eastern and Western Church, which eventually led to the official split of the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Greek Orthodox Church. Why would the emperor of the greatest empire in the world just hand over half of his territory and even give them justification for claiming superiority over the other half of the empire in later times to a religious leader of a religion that supposedly preaches humility? Well, he wouldn't. And he didn't. This never happened. The greedy priests and bishops, and in particular the Bishop of Rome, wanted power. They wanted status. They wanted legal justification for their own hierarchy. They wanted legal justification for their land seizures. In short, they were greedy. They lied. They forged a document and they used it to justify actions for centuries. They used it as their justification for supremacy over rulers of European kingdoms throughout the Middle Ages. What gets me about this is Christ's basic message was, love your neighbor. The meek shall inherit the earth. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, etc. And yet, here is an early example of Christians grabbing power illegally, through deceit. They claimed dominion over earthly kings, and they set the stage for theocracy. It's easy for modern people living in Western secular democracies to look back at history, especially the Middle Ages, with a certain detachment. Something like the Spanish Inquisition seems like more of a joke from a Monty Python skit than a reality. But it was real. Medieval societies were not secular. The Roman Empire wasn't exactly secular either, but it was tolerant of most religions. Christianity, with its one true God philosophy, had not only infiltrated the Roman state, but it eventually spilled over into the courts of all of the medieval kingdoms. The donation of Constantine, a forgery, a lie, was one very big step towards theocracy in Europe. When you look at theocratic countries like Iran or the tribal areas of Afghanistan where clerics run the show and women are stoned to death for adultery, where books are burned for teaching something that is heretical to Islam, you should think about the early church. There are many similarities. That is why people need to be more aware of when religions try to grab power. It happens in little steps, sometimes with a lie, sometimes with a vote, but all monotheistic religions are the same in this way.